Welcome back to Plan B, a life coach's journal podcast. I'm Amir Farhangi, and today we are looking at episode 2, diving into something I think will resonate with so many of us. We're talking about life in the fast lane, where everything feels like it's speeding up, from the constant flow of information to the expectations we place on ourselves. And with this modern pace, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, as if you're barely keeping up. In today's episode, we'll explore a few mental health practices that can help us find a sense of calm. I'll share 2 foundations tools. One, the fact that we covered last week around movement and exercise. And the second one that I am going to emphasize this week is self-positive talk, what I call in the methodology ROAR. By the end of today's episode, I hope you will have some actionable steps to feel a bit lighter, more grounded, and ready to tackle whatever comes your way. Remember, these are the foundations, part of our approach towards success. Before starting anything, we need to sort the foundations. We need to make sure we are in the right level of energy, in the right level of mentality, so we can start looking ahead and targeting our vision. Without that level of energy and emotion, we will not be able to step into that journey, and that's very important. First section, I wanted to maybe cover a little bit around the fast-paced modern life and why it can feel overwhelming. The reason I added this into this episode of podcast was this is something that happens for me quite often, especially now that I started this journey as a venture. So previously it was just a very casual read and application in my workplace, but now I started websites, podcasts, have a plan to start Instagram, YouTube, and it all a one-man show at this stage, and so it feels very overwhelming. And sometimes you think that you lose clarity because you don't know what to do, especially in this modern world. Everything is so fast. You have a feeling sometimes that you are missing out. It's very important that every now and then we stop, we pause and breathe and understand a slowly but steady movement is much better than looking everywhere, and have a proper direction, have a proper strategy towards what we are going to do. And this is important to take care of our mental health, sometimes slow down, and hopefully today's subject around the self-positive talk will also address. So let's start by exploring what makes modern life feel so overwhelming. It's not just about busy schedules or never-ending to-do list. Part of it is the sheer speed at which everything is happening. We're constantly bombarded with information and with social media, with news, work emails, and everything else coming at us 24/7. Our minds rarely get a chance to rest. Even our bodies feel this speed. Studies show that people today experience more decision fatigue and information overload than ever before. Our brains are working hard trying to process everything, and it can feel like we're on high alert all the time. This stress response can leave us feeling mentally drained and even paralyzed at times, like we can't handle one more thing. I remember when I started looking at reducing this level of fatigue in decision making, everything in my mind looks chaotic. So I started going through some of the advices from the big names in the industry. And some of them are, first of all, try to make everything as much as possible automated. So straight away, I changed my car to the automated gear car because I didn't want even to make a decision around changing the gear. Or make sure that you don't have that variety of clothes for the day-to-day going outside. So you don't need to make decision even what is it that I need to wear today. And the power of routine was also another important factor. As much as possible, if we can set up a routine in our life, it will help us to have less decision fatigue. These are all elements that you can easily implement. One last thing, which is not for everyone necessarily, but I would say it really helps if you can practice it. And maybe when you get to the mindfulness, I will tell you how to practice it. That is power nap. Power nap is also a very strong tool whenever we feel fatigue in our brain, in our decision making, in our mind. If we can have 10 minutes, 15 minutes power nap, that will help a lot. It charges the battery in our brains so quickly. At least it works for me that way. Anyway, so this sense of overwhelm, of course, make it hard to focus, and it reduces our productivity and over time impact our mental health. But while we can't slow down the world around us, we can change how we experience it. We don't need necessarily run around that fast. We can find shortcuts. We can be more intelligent, more smart. And that's where Plan B and today's foundations elements also come in. Okay, so the next part I want to cover in the podcast is around the physical movement and quick mood booster. We covered it a little bit last week, but I have a feeling that last week, because it was my first episode and I had a little bit of maybe not familiar with recording and not delivering a good speech. I'm sure it gets better, so bear with me. But last week we talked about the 2 minutes rule and how movement, even just a couple of minutes, can create a positive shift in our mood. I'm a big believer in small actions because they're often the easiest to stick to, and even 2 minutes can make a difference. Let's take a moment to talk about why this works. So when we exercise, our bodies releases endorphins. So those feel good hormones that act as natural mood boosters. But it's not just endorphins. Exercise helps increase level of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin, which help regulate our mood. It can reduce feelings of stress and anxiety and even depression. And here is a fun fact. Movement doesn't just boost our mood, it also helps our brain work better. Exercise increases blood flow to the brain, delivering oxygen, nutrition, which help us think more clearly, focus better. So even if it is a few jumping jacks or a brisk walk around the block, that little burst of activity has a big impact. I mentioned last week that the 2 minutes rules will lead you to more and more 7 minutes workout, and if you can go even higher to up to 15 minutes, I would say. That might seem short, but the studies shows that high intensity intervals training, even for just 7 minutes, can be highly effective. Your heart rate spikes, you sweat, and by the end, you feel a genuine mental shift. The key is consistency. You don't need a gym or fancy equipment, just a commitment to get moving. And don't let the idea of preparing kill your motivation. Sometimes the best workouts are in your pajamas, just getting started without overthinking it. And as a last resort, if you don't feel that you can do the exercise today, start a chore. Sometimes I rather pick up the vacuum and start cleaning around the house, because in that 10-15 minutes, it has the same effect that I am looking for. And so it's one stone with two targets. So enough of the movement and exercise. I know that we will come back to this discussion again. The next part of the podcast is the self-positive talk, or the abbreviation I use was ROAR. And it's actually rooted towards, if you are familiar with cognitive behavior therapy. Let's move on then to today's main mental health focus. So ROAR, what I called, is a self-positive talk practice rooted in principles from CBT. In a nutshell, what is CBT? CBT is about changing the way we think to change the way we feel and act. It's a practice used by therapists to help people deal with anxiety, depression, and other challenges by reframing negative thought patterns. I named this ROAR because it's about reclaiming control of our thoughts and emotions. So imagine that you have something happening in your life, an adversary, a bad event, something that you start thinking about it, and you start making stories in your mind. You start making scenarios, and usually those scenarios tends to become worst case scenarios. Maybe it is part of our survival evolution journey that we had from million years, that we need to think of the worst case scenario and therefore think of fight or flight scenarios. But in reality, especially in the modern world, and for the human with the smart brain, we can change that pattern. We don't need necessarily fall into the worst case scenario, because worst case scenario is not something that happens all the time. And CBT will help us to understand that yes, adversity is there outside. Bad things happens outside to us, but our understanding from the event, the lesson we learn from the event, what we get from the situation is up to us. the conclusion we get from this situation is up to us. We can translate the event into something very positive, and that all of a sudden can change our mind. For example, you called your boss and he or she didn't answer for some reason, and then you send some emails around some aspect of work, and that person again doesn't reply to you straight away, or sometimes even it might last for a couple of days, and you start thinking, is this something happen that I need to be worried about, because my boss usually contacted me straight away and I have a bad feeling around the situation. And you can see that for some individuals this can lead into very worst case scenarios that affect the life of that individual so much so that it can lead to depression, stress, and anxiety, high level of anxiety. While the CBT suggests that, okay, something happened, and usually the therapist in the CBT or cognitive behavior therapy work as facilitator and suggest to the person that, what do you think we need to do? What other scenario can be the reason of this situation? And the person who's receiving the therapy start making the new scenarios. For example, maybe my boss is on holiday, or maybe something urgent happens. He or she didn't have time to review my emails or reply to my call. Or the other reason can be that the boss might actually be in a mission, last minute called, or something happened that can happen to everyone, that you don't have time to address everything, all the emails. And usually I would say 9 out of 10, this is the case, and you will reach to that person and you find out, yes, there was something happened that wasn't that much of worry of an anxiety or worst case scenario that the person was thinking. And even if it is the case, the CBT will help us to bring us to a new level of understanding that everything is actually in our control, rather than be nervous and anxious about the situation and going very reactive and defensive towards the problem. We can be proactive, we can be offering better solutions, better outcomes. So it's very important to have that sense of self-positive talk. I named this technique ROAR, and it's actually an abbreviation of 4 letters. And it stands for reflect, observe, analyze, and react. Let's break down each step then. So reflect is every day set aside a few minutes, and we had this in the journal as well, to write down about behind our mood. Write down and think about what made you feel happy or unhappy. What made you feel stressed or upset. And this isn't about judgment, just noticing the thing that impacted your day. Was there something that lifted your mood, or maybe something that made you feel off balance? Reflections gives us insight into what affects us emotionally. So the next step is to observe and take a look at your own behavior. How did you react to those bad events or to those adversaries? Were you calm, or did you feel frustrated? The goal here isn't to criticize yourself, it's just to become aware of your natural response. Just observe yourself, that's it. Remember, what did you do? Remember what feeling did you have and what that feeling lead you. And then analyze it. And this is where things get interesting for the negative events. Think about what could have been another way to respond. Imagine if you had a magic wand and could reframe the situation. What would that look like? We often jump to the worst case scenario, and especially when we are stressed, but there are countless other interpretations of what happened. When we explore alternative explanations, we reduce stress and begin to feel sense of control. And finally, react. So what does that mean? We need to use this insight to shape how you will respond next time. Often during this process, we will come across small actions or realizations that can help us manage similar situations better in future. Write this down, capture them, and try to apply them the next day. Practicing ROAR is very important. So I strongly suggest that you start practice from now. Let's walk through an example. Imagine you've been waiting on a response from someone at work, and the week has gone by with no reply. Your first thought might be, they're ignoring me because they're upset. But after reflecting and analyzing, you come up with different scenarios, different stories. Maybe they're busy with another project, or maybe they have a personal matter to attend. By the time you've gone through this exercise, you will notice you feel calmer. This is the power of these reflections. This is the power of the roar, helping us find positive, proactive responses rather than getting stuck in worst case scenarios. Personally, I like to record my roar reflections as a voice note, and some people prefer to write them down. But I find that speaking helps me capture the emotion of the moment. I can revisit these notes later, and it's amazing to see how much clarity I gain by simply talking it out. Last part of this podcast, I want to ask you to practice study, so build resilience and gain control. What I hope you take away from today is that mental resilience is like a muscle. Just as we build strength by exercising, we build resilience by practicing these techniques. Movement and roar are two of my go-to tools, and I encourage you to try them. Start with the small actions like 2 minutes rule and see how it impacts your mood. Then try adding roar. It might feel strange at first, but the more you practice, the easier it becomes to find those positive, empowering response. And remember, what we are actually experiencing is getting from the self-negative talk to the positive, proactive talk. And the positive, proactive talk within us is so powerful that can provide you with lots of solutions, with lots of way forwards, actions, and you start learning from your experience, from yourself, from your positive self within you, and you will see how powerful you can be. So try it, and please write some comments and let me know if you manage to utilize these tools and what you think, what stories or what situations you experienced. And finally, I would like to update with what is coming ahead. Before we wrap up, I have a few updates. First, Plan B, a life coach journal, is now available on Apple, Google, and Spotify and Amazon. Listen wherever it's easier for you. I'm working on some training videos for YouTube and launching in a couple of months, and gearing up to be more active on Instagram. And I struggle with the time I have to address everything. And at the moment, because I'm developing, it's not yet getting to the routine aspects. As soon as things get to the routine, I feel much better and I feel that I can control, like the blog, like the podcast. They are at the moment in a routine weekly basis, but the Instagram and YouTube, I'm still preparing material. I'm still preparing the formats, templates. That's why it takes more time. But that's my plan, to start with 3 posts a week and 1 story per day, something that you can actually get value out of it. It's not just necessarily just feeling the Instagram, something that you feel that, okay, by following this channel every day, you get something out of it, this channel, and it boosts your energy, boosts your feeling. And it's been a learning curve, balancing time with my day job and figuring out the best way to provide valuable content. And I'm focusing on meaningful posts that will help you make progress in productivity and find a sense of contentment. So keep an eye out. Next week, I'll start posting regularly. And the last thing I want to say, thanks so much for tuning in today. Remember, no matter how fast life moves, we can choose how we navigate it. Embrace small actions like movement, like roar, and over time, watch your resilience grow. The road to a content-balanced life is one step at a time. Take care and see you in the next episode on Plan B Life Coach Journal. Bye.